The storm that tore through Dead Man's Gulch wasn't the kind you waited out. It was the kind that changed everything. Bo Maddox had gone there to be alone to drink in peace where no one would follow. But when the saloon door blew open and Willa Hart stepped in drenched in snow eyes sharp as broken glass danger clinging to her, like the scent of smoke, peace was no longer an option. With a half-frozen girl clutching a burlap sack worth killing for and a gang of riders closing in, Bo found himself standing between two strangers and the kind of men who don't leave survivors. What began as a night of whiskey and silence would become a fight in the dark, a desperate flight through snow and blood, and a choice neither Bo nor Willa could walk away from. Because sometimes in the coldest hours you find something worth protecting, and it changes the way you face the dawn. The wind didn't whisper through Dead Man's Gulch, it screamed. It tore down from the high ridges like a banshee skimming snow off stone and scouring the warped boards of the old saloon that clung to life in the gulch's throat. The building leaned like a drunk against the mountain, one shutter hanging loose, the lantern light inside, flickering with each gust. Bo Maddox sat hunched at the bar boots, caked in frost hat pulled low, a hand wrapped around a chipped glass of rye that hadn't warmed him in years. He was a man carved from silence and consequence, weathered as the land outside, quieter than the grave. He hadn't come to the gulch for company. He came because no one followed a man into a place already half swallowed by the storm. Then the saloon door groaned open with a screech that cut through the room like a blade. The wind rushed in first, along with snow smoke and something else. Her. She stepped through the threshold like a ghost from some fevered dream boots, crunching frost into the warped floor. Her cloak had been lost somewhere in the storm behind her, and what remained was a dress the color of night black velvet soaked at the hem, clinging to her like a second skin. The slit along her thigh moved as she walked every step, revealing danger wrapped in grace. She was flame against snow. Her auburn hair tumbled wet across her shoulders, catching the lantern light like dying embers. Snowflakes hissed and vanished on her bare collarbone. Her lips full-parted, uncertain, showed a breath drawn deep and slow, as if weighing whether to speak or shoot. And her eyes. They were green, sharp as broken glass, and they locked onto Bo like they'd known his sins long before this night. The saloon went still. A few heads turned. Some men shifted uneasily on their stools. Bo didn't move, didn't need to. He could feel the heat of her from across the room. The storm had brought more than wind, it had delivered trouble. Beautiful, feral trouble. She strode to the bar boots, echoing, and leaned against it. Her skin was damp with snowmelt and sweat, and she smelled faintly of sage and smoke, like something old, wild, and sacred. "Whiskey," she said. Her voice was low, roughened at the edges, like someone who hadn't rested in days. She didn't look at the barkeep. Her eyes were still on Bo. Measuring, challenging. He tipped his hat a notch in respect, but didn't return her stare. "Ma'am." Just that. One word, enough to show he wasn't blind, but not so much he was stupid. He knew her kind, not dime novel temptresses, but women running from blood. The kind that burned through men like prairie fire, left scars where hands once touched. She smirked, and the corner of her mouth curled like it knew too many secrets. Then outside, the sound of a horse screaming broke the stillness. Hooves thundered past. A shout followed, harsh and close. The door slammed shut behind her from the force of the wind, but her gaze didn't flinch. It only flicked to the window. Bo turned fully now, his spine stiffening. The barkeep, a grizzled man with half a beard and a shotgun under the bar, grunted. "They ain't after any of us," he muttered. "They're after her." Bo's hand hovered near his hip. Not because of the girl Willa Hart he'd learn later, but because of what he saw in her stance, defiance. Not fear, not surrender. Just a silent, burning readiness to fight. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, something else rose, something old and human and unspoken. He didn't know her name. Not yet. But he already knew this. This night wouldn't end with whiskey. It would end in gunfire choices and the kind of silence that changes everything. The saloon was still humming from her entrance when the back door slammed open with a crack like a gunshot. Snow burst in around a figure hunched against the cold, a girl small, soaked through, maybe 15 at best. Her coat was torn at the sleeve, one boot half-laced. Her cheeks burned red from wind and panic, and in her arms she clutched a burlap sack with both hands like it held something alive. Her chest rose and fell in quick bursts as she darted through the room. Her gaze locked instantly on Willa Hart. "Willa, they're close," the girl gasped, voice high and shaking. "They followed us all the way from Iron Hook Ridge." Willa didn't hesitate. She dropped her whiskey to the floor where it shattered. Her boots moved fast, velvet skirt flaring as she crossed to the girl and dropped to her knees, pulling her in tight. "Easy, Sadie. You're all right? I've got you." The way she said it low and fierce, like she'd kill the world to keep that promise, rattled something loose in Bo Maddox. It wasn't the curve of Willa's thigh exposed where her dress had torn. Wasn't the snow melting on her lashes. It was that voice, that tone. It was the way her hand cradled the back of the girl's head, shielding her from every eye in the room, like they were still alone in the storm. Bo pushed off the bar instincts overriding whiskey. His boots thudded over warped floorboards as he crossed the room, placing his body just slightly between the women and the window. His revolver hung heavy at his side, still holstered, but his fingers flexed with memory. Willa stood. The girl, Sadie, pressed close to her hip, still clinging to the sack. Willa's gaze snapped to Bo, fierce and unapologetic. "You got a plan, mister?" she asked, chin up, daring. He glanced at the girl, then back to Willa. "Depends. You running from men or ghosts?" "Men," Willa said tight. "Real ones, with real bullets, and one of 'em likes to take scalps." Bo's jaw flexed. A shout split the wind outside. Hooves pounded past again. Bo moved to the frost-rimmed window, wiped a clear line through the pane with his palm. Shapes emerged, 5 riders circling the gulch, slow and deliberate. Their silhouettes looked more beast than man, black against the white rifles slung low, bandanas pulled up high. They weren't riding fast because they didn't have to. They were hunting. Willa stepped beside him, her shoulder brushing his coat. The contact was electric, not warm exactly, but sharp. A jolt that said she wasn't afraid of him, but she noticed. Her breath fogged the glass. "They're here for the sack." Bo turned toward the girl. Sadie's eyes were too wide, too knowing. Her knuckles were white against the burlap. The barkeep Hollis, a man who'd once gunned down 2 brothers in a poker dispute, leaned in behind the counter. "I heard about that job out of Claystone Bank. Word was someone double-crossed the crew and vanished with near 8,000 in dust and coin." Willa didn't blink. Word travels too damn fast. Bo nodded at the sack. That true Sadie's voice cracked. "It was gonna go to worse men. She took it for me." Willa's lips were a hard line. "It's blood gold, sure, but it was earned wrong to start with." The room creaked beneath their silence. Bo looked between them. Willa didn't ask for pity. The girl wasn't crying. And the way both of them stood shoulder to shoulder, cornered but unbowed, it reminded him of something. Or someone. A ghost from his past he'd buried in a shallow grave a decade back. He cleared his throat. "I can buy you a night. No promises after that." Willa's eyes met his. "One night's all I'm asking." Another shout came from outside. Then silence. Not peace. The kind of silence that meant they'd dismounted. Bo's spine straightened. "They're gonna come through the front." Hollis barked trapdoor behind the bar. "Leads to the old cellar. Won't hold 'em long, but it'll get you out of sight." Willa didn't hesitate. She grabbed Sadie's hand. The girl gripped the sack tighter and nodded once, jaw clenched. Bo pulled the counter aside, kicked open the hatch. A waft of cold earth and damp whiskey rolled up like breath from a tomb. Sadie dropped down first. Willa followed her velvet dress, catching on a nail splitting another inch up her thigh. She didn't flinch, didn't care. She had a girl to protect. Bo slid in after them, closing the hatch just as the front saloon door burst open upstairs. Boots thundered across floorboards. Voices barked commands. A bottle smashed. Then came silence again, searching silence. Down in the dark, Willa drew a knife from her boot. Her silhouette moved like smoke. She pressed Sadie into a corner behind a barrel and knelt in front of her, whispering something Bo couldn't hear. He didn't need to. The girl's breathing slowed. Bo crouched low, gun-drawn eyes on the trapdoor. "What's in the sack?" he asked. Voice hushed. Willa didn't look at him. What they'd kill for. What I'd die to keep from them. Sadie swallowed hard. "It's gold." Bo nodded. Of course it was. Blood-stained, heat-branded, freedom-purchased gold. He looked at Willa again. She was a shadow in the dim. A woman born of fire and frost. She wasn't trembling, but her hand hovered over the girl like a shield. He whispered, "You a thief." She finally met his eyes. "I'm surviving." That answer landed like a hammer in Bo's chest. And he knew then this wasn't just a fight for a sack of stolen gold. It was a fight for what's worth saving in a world that forgets too easily what that means. The trapdoor shut above them with a heavy thud cutting off the flickering light from the saloon. Only a sliver of glow remained, leaking through the floorboards like the last breath of day. The cellar smelled of old barrels, wet stone, and something sour, spilled whiskey or old sweat, hard to tell. It was cold, too, the kind that clung to your boots and crawled up your spine. Bo Maddox pressed his back to the dirt wall and cocked his revolver. The click echoed louder than he meant. Across from him, Willa Hart crouched low, her silhouette barely visible in the candle stub's faint light. Her dress, dark and torn, clung to her knees, soaked at the hem. She didn't complain, didn't even shiver. Sadie Quinn huddled in the farthest corner, the burlap sack clenched to her chest like it was part of her. Her breathing was sharp, almost too loud. Bo wanted to tell her to quiet down, but then he saw Willa's hand move, a slow, steady gesture across the girl's hair, smoothing it back from her temple, like a mother might do. And just like that, Sadie's panic began to melt. Her shoulders dropped. Her breath slowed. It was a small moment, but in that damp hole under a dying saloon, with danger thudding around above them like a storm with boots, it felt like a miracle. Boots pounded on the floorboards overhead. Willa tensed. Her hand moved from Sadie's hair to the knife at her side. Her eyes flicked toward Bo, reflecting the flame's glow. She said nothing, but he saw it in her. If they find us, she won't beg. She'll bleed first. He moved closer to the trapdoor, crouching low. Dust fell from the seams in the boards as the raiders stalked above them. "They're spreading out," he whispered. Willa edged closer too, her presence tightening the air. He could feel the warmth of her beside him, a contrast to the cold damp settling in his bones. Her scent still faintly of sage sweat and leather lingered even here in the dark. "You ever been cornered before?" she asked, voice low. "More times than I like to remember." "You come out." Bo didn't answer at first. Then finally, "Still breathing, ain't I?" Her mouth curled, not quite a smile, something more tired, like she knew what it cost to survive. A floorboard above them creaked. Heavy, deliberate. Someone was standing directly over the trapdoor. Bo raised his gun. Willa crouched lower, her knife gleaming at the ready. Sadie whimpered. A voice rang out muffled but sharp. "She's here. I smell her." Bo didn't breathe. Willa didn't blink. Another boot step. Then bang! The trapdoor flew open, lantern light slicing into the dark like a blade. A raider loomed at the top of the steps, rifle raised. Bo fired. The shot cracked like thunder. The man dropped without a sound, his body thudding down the cellar stairs in a heap. Willa moved fast, kicking the rifle aside and dragging the corpse back under the lip of the floor. Her movements were fluid, practiced. Her dress bunched as she knelt, revealing a streak of thigh. But Bo didn't look. Not this time. Not when her hands were slick with blood and her jaw clenched tight. "They know," she muttered. That was just the first. Bo wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Then we hold this damn door till they stop coming." More boots above. Shouts, reloading clicks. Sadie clung to the sack. Her lips trembled, and when she spoke, her voice cracked. "They'll kill us." Willa knelt beside her again, pressing her palm gently to the girl's cheek. "No, sweetheart. They'll try. But they'll have to go through me and him first." Sadie's eyes widened, darting between Willa and Bo. She didn't answer, but she didn't cry either. Willa turned back to Bo, wiping her blade clean on her skirt. "We got maybe one more shot at surprise before they toss dynamite down here. Then we better make it count." They reset. Bo at the bottom of the steps, revolver reloaded. Willa just behind him, crouched low, knife in hand. Sadie tucked in the shadows behind stacked crates. Above, silence reigned. Too quiet. Willa leaned in her breath, warm on Bo's ear. "You ever wonder what makes a man choose to stay in a place like this all the time? What's your answer?" He didn't look at her. Sometimes a place is just quiet enough to hear yourself die. Willa's hand brushed his elbow. It wasn't romantic. It was anchoring. Two survivors holding the line in the last safe place left in the world. Then the cellar stairs creaked again. This one didn't shout, didn't charge. He moved slow, steady. A taller figure, heavier step. Bo waited until the raider's shadow filled the stairwell, then lunged. The two collided with a brutal crunch. The lantern above tilted light swinging wildly. The two men crashed into the dirt. Fists flew. Grunts echoed. Willa moved to flank, knife drawn, but Bo shouted, "Stay back!" He took a fist to the jaw, tasted blood, then rammed his knee into the raider's ribs. The man choked, and that's when Willa moved anyway. Her blade plunged deep into the raider's shoulder. He screamed, and Bo finished the fight with the butt of his revolver, cracking the man's skull with one final blow. Silence again. Breathing. Sweat. Pain. Bo staggered back. Willa caught him briefly by the arm, just long enough to steady him. Her hand was warm, firm. "You don't listen so well," he muttered. "You needed help." Their eyes met. Not flirtation, just a quiet shared exhaustion. Respect forged in blood and grit. Sadie was crying now. Not loudly. Just soft, shaking tears she couldn't hold in anymore. Willa crossed the room, knelt again, wrapped her arms around the girl. Bo watched them from the shadow. He'd seen plenty of women run. Plenty scream. He'd seen few who stood their ground with blood on their hands and a child at their back. Willa Hart wasn't what he'd expected, but she might be exactly what he'd been missing. He turned back to the steps. Blood pooled below. More were coming. He could feel it in his bones. And for once in a long damn time, Bo Maddox found himself not just fighting to survive, but fighting for someone else. The second body hadn't gone cold before the third man shouted from above. "Down there I saw light." Willa spun toward the trapdoor blade, raised eyes blazing. Her breath fogged in the cold air of the cellar, but her posture held like steel. Her dress was smeared with dust and blood, torn high up her thigh now, the velvet darkening where it clung to her. Still she stood silent, unflinching, protective. Sadie whimpered behind her. The girl was crouched in a recess between two barrels, the burlap sack clenched like a lifeline. Her eyes darted between Bo and Willa, watching, absorbing. She was young, yes, but not weak. Bo saw it in the set of her jaw, the way she'd stopped shaking. Above them, boots shifted fast. Voices barked in discord. They were arguing now about who would go down next. That meant the last two had been important. Leaders, maybe. That bought them a few seconds. Bo holstered his pistol long enough to reach for the lantern dimmed from the last skirmish. He twisted the wick, then slid behind the wine casks, dragging a crate into place to block the lower stair. Not that it would stop bullets, but it might buy a breath or two. "You know how many left?" he asked, eyes still locked on the stairs. Willa didn't hesitate. 3, maybe 4. Depends if they had a man on the ridge. Bo grunted. Course they did. The hatch above creaked. A voice called out again, this time slower, more deliberate. Willa Hart. It was a man's voice. Southern drawl, slick with mockery. "You got something that don't belong to you. You hand it over, we let the girl live. Might even let you walk if you crawl first." Sadie flinched. Willa turned toward the voice, raising hers to reply, not in a scream, not in panic, but with the chill precision of a woman who had been hunted before and was done playing games. "You want it," she said. "Come take it." A beat of silence. Then a gunshot tore through the floorboards, splinters raining down like shrapnel. The shot barely missed Bo's shoulder. He shoved Willa aside hard as a second bullet punched into the wall behind them. "Time to move," he growled. They scrambled. Bo grabbed Sadie by the arm and helped her up, shielding her with his body, as Willa kicked open a panel in the stone wall, a narrow chute once used for rolling barrels out to the back alley. It was tight and steep and now half frozen with ice, but it led somewhere. He turned to Willa. "You first. I'll cover." But she shook her head and shoved Sadie toward the opening. "The girl goes, then me. You hold." Bo opened his mouth to argue, then caught the look in her eyes. It wasn't pride. It was strategy. She knew the space, knew she could move faster once the girl was clear. Sadie crawled through the chute boots, scraping sack still clutched to her chest. Willa was right behind her. Bo turned just in time to catch the shadow dropping into the trap door. He didn't fire right away. Instead, he waited for the boots to land, for the shoulders to hunch, for the breath to draw in. Then he fired. The man jerked once, then fell face first onto the stone. The pistol in his hand clattered against the floor. Bo didn't wait for the body to stop twitching. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time, emerging into the wrecked saloon. The wind from the busted window cut straight through him. Tables were overturned, chairs splintered. Blood trailed across the floor like ink on a torn map. The last 2 raiders stood near the bar rifles, drawn eyes wide. One turned, too slow. Bo shot him through the chest. The other fired back, missing by a yard. Bo dove behind a support beam, bullets chewing the wood around him. Somewhere outside, the wind howled louder, as if the storm itself wanted blood. He reloaded fast, counting the seconds. Then he saw her. Willa, cloaked in moonlight, crouched just behind the stairs with a second blade in her hand. Her hair had come loose, tangled and wet. Her lip was bleeding. But she moved like a shadow, quick and sure. The raider didn't see her until it was too late. She launched forward, driving the knife into the meat of his thigh. He screamed, buckled. Bo stepped out and fired the finishing shot. Silence dropped over the room like a curtain. Willa stood over the man's body, breathing hard, hair wild. Her dress was nearly ruined, torn, stained, riding high up her legs, but she didn't seem to care. She looked over at Bo. "You all right?" He nodded. "You?" She gave a half smile. "We're breathing." They didn't speak more than that. No need. Some things didn't require words, not in a night like this. They made their way to the back, finding the chute half buried in snow. Willa slipped through first, hands raw from the cold. Bo followed. They found Sadie crouched behind a fallen pine, the sack still safe in her lap, her eyes watching the dark tree line. "We clear?" she asked. Willa nodded. "For now." Bo looked at them both, two figures drawn together by blood and gold and something stronger than either. "I've got a horse a mile out," he said. "If it's still there, we can ride before the rest come sniffing." Willa met his eyes. For the first time there was trust there. Not surrender, not softness, just a shared understanding between two people who had been burned and buried and somehow clawed their way back up again. Sadie stood and slung the sack over her shoulder. She looked tired. More than that, she looked ready. "Then let's go," she said. Bo couldn't help the faint curl of a smile that touched his mouth. That girl had steel in her bones. As they turned toward the woods, the saloon behind them bled lamplight into the snow one last time. Then it flickered and died. The storm still raged overhead, but for the first time in hours, Bo didn't feel lost in it. He had something to protect again, and maybe, just maybe, someone to walk beside. Snow fell thick and steady now, muffling hoofbeats and gunshots alike. It clung to the pines in heavy sheets and blanketed the rocky hills rising east of the gulch. Bo Maddox led the way, his coat soaked through and his pistol gripped in one hand. Every step crunched. Every breath came in cold and ragged. Behind him, Willa Hart trudged on her ruined velvet dress gathered in one hand, the other wrapped tight around Sadie Quinn. The girl moved like she'd been taught how to survive, and was learning now what it meant to live. They reached the frozen creek just before dawn where the trees broke and the land dipped shallow into a clearing scattered with scrub and ice-slick stone. Bo stopped and raised a hand. "Rest a minute," he said. Sadie collapsed beside a crooked log, the burlap sack still pressed to her chest. Willa stood breathing hard steam rising from her shoulders. The storm had eased. The wind had stopped screaming. Only snow whispered now, sifting quietly over the world, like ash after a fire. Bo scanned the woods behind them. No riders, no sounds but the creak of settling snow and Sadie's quiet, steady breaths. They had made it out of the gulch, but it wasn't over. Willa walked to the edge of the creek and stood in profile, her figure stark against the silver snow. Her hair, unbound, windblown, cascaded down her back like a blood-dark banner. Her arms were bare-skinned, pale and bruised, but she didn't shiver. Bo came up beside her. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, feeling the cold settle in his bones, listening to the world hold its breath. Finally, he said, "That gold. They won't stop coming for it." Willa nodded slowly. "I know. You could bury it. Lose it. Start fresh." She looked at him then, eyes green and sharp, but not cruel. "I didn't steal it for myself." He studied her a long moment. "Why then?" She turned to glance at Sadie. The girl had curled onto her side, still clutching the sack, but her eyes were half closed now, trust written across her face like an unspoken prayer. Willa's voice came quiet. That gold was meant for blood. Robbery turned to murder. A job gone wrong. One man tried to stop the killing. He died for it. The rest ran with the take. I ran with it too, but I ran with her. Bo looked away, jaw tight. "You ever think maybe it's cursed?" "Maybe," she whispered. "But curses don't scare me. What scares me is a world where that girl grows up thinking no one ever stood between her and the men who wanted to use her up. That landed hard. Deep. Bo didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer. His hand brushed hers, not by accident this time. It was a question, and she didn't pull away. A moment passed, too soft to name, too steady to ignore. Then Sadie stirred. Someone's coming. Bo turned on instinct. Far down the ridge, 3 riders broke from the trees, dark shapes against a rising, pale sky. Not the whole gang, but enough. Willa stepped forward. We'll never outrun them now. No, Bo agreed, but we can outlast them. He scanned the clearing. A low slope led to a rocky bluff to the west. A shallow rise overlooked the only pass out of the canyon. Good cover, one way in. We hold there, he said. Buy enough time for her to slip out through the draw. There's a hollowed cottonwood stump at the base. She can stay hidden till we circle back or don't. Willa didn't argue. She looked at him, something flickering behind her eyes. You sure know? He holstered his pistol. But I've got one more fight in me. Sadie had gone pale, but she stood. I'm not leaving you. Willa bent to her knees and placed both hands on the girl's shoulders. You're not running, Sadie. You're surviving. You've done it before. You'll do it again. Sadie's lip trembled. I don't want to survive alone. Willa touched her cheek. Then don't be alone. Wait for us. And if we don't come, take that gold and build something better. The girl nodded. Bo led them up to the bluff. The rocks there formed a narrow, natural wall. Willa crouched low behind a boulder, reloading her revolver, an old Colt with a cracked handle. Her knife gleamed at her thigh. Bo crouched beside her rifle, resting on his knee. Snow settled in his beard. The cold bit through his boots. Below, the riders slowed. One of them, a tall man with a red bandana and a heavy rifle, dismounted, scanning the bluff. They'll try to flank us, Bo said. Then we don't give 'em time. They opened fire at once, 2 sharp cracks in the morning stillness. The led horse reared. The man with the bandana dropped hard. The remaining 2 scattered, one ducking behind brush, the other circling wide. Gunfire answered. Bullets snapped into rock, sent chips flying. Bo shifted left and fired again, hitting nothing. Willa covered the flank, her blade flashing as a shadow lunged up the ridge. She met him with grit and speed, driving her knife into his side before he could fire. They toppled together into the snow. Bo turned just in time to see her rise, face smeared with blood, breath ragged, but alive. The last raider charged up the bluff, shotgun raised. Bo's rifle clicked empty. The man aimed. Then Sadie's voice rang out clear and high. Now Bo dove as Willa hurled her second blade. It struck the raider square in the chest. He dropped without firing. Silence again. Snow fell. Wind returned. They stayed there for a moment, neither speaking, just breathing. Sadie emerged from the tree-lined sack still in hand, tears frozen on her cheeks. She ran straight into Willa's arms. Bo stood apart watching the 2 of them. Willa looked over her shoulder. You still got fight in you. He nodded. I got what matters. They made their way down the ridge, slowly, carefully, every movement echoing in the fresh silence of the land. By the time the sun cracked the sky, Dead Man's Gulch was behind them, washed clean by snow and blood. Before them stretched something else. Not safety, not certainty, but possibility. And in this wild, broken world, that was enough. The snow had stopped falling by the time they reached the edge of the basin. What remained of the storm drifted above the tree line, thin silver veils of mist slipping through pines like ghosts too tired to haunt. The creek, frozen solid, groaned beneath their boots as they crossed, but none of them paused. Not until the gulch was a memory behind them, and the first amber light of morning split the frost-glazed horizon. Bo Maddox walked ahead, his rifle slung across his shoulder, and his steps slow but steady. His coat was torn hat, lost somewhere in the scuffle, and blood crusted along his jaw where the last raider had landed a lucky hit. But his back was straight, his eyes forward. Willa Hart followed close, holding Sadie Quinn's hand with a grip that never wavered. Her velvet dress was little more than rags, now torn at the thigh, dark with soot and old blood, but she walked like a woman reborn. Her hair, tangled and half-frozen, streamed down her back in waves. Every step she took forward was one the world had said she'd never survive. Sadie trudged beside her in silence. The burlap sack still hung from her shoulder, heavier than gold should be, yet she refused to let go. In that sack was blood money, a past they couldn't erase, but also a future they just might buy. They reached a small outcropping above the valley where the land dipped into low, open prairie. Wind rolled across the tall grass in gentle waves. Far in the distance, a pair of hawks circled. There was no sign of pursuit. No more gunshots. Just breath snow, and the fragile quiet that follows after men have stopped killing each other for a while anyway. Willa sat first, knees folding beneath her with a grace that belied the battle she'd fought. Sadie collapsed beside her, curling into her side without hesitation. The girl didn't speak, but she didn't have to. Her fingers found Willa's and clung tight. Bo stayed standing. He looked out across the horizon, scanning not for enemies, but for something he couldn't name. Maybe peace. Maybe direction. Maybe just a reason to keep moving when the world no longer gave him one. "You think it's over?" Willa asked softly. Bo turned. "No, but it's quieter now. And that's a start." She nodded. Her eyes were tired but sharp. The fire in them hadn't dimmed. If anything, it had settled, turned inward. More dangerous that way, more lasting. Sadie finally spoke, a voice no louder than the wind. "What do we do now?" Bo met Willa's eyes. She looked at the girl, then back at him. "We head south," she said. "New territory. New names if we need them." Bo rubbed his chin. "There's land out by Bitter Hollow. Nothing but stone and pine. Could build something there." "Something safe?" Sadie asked. Willa smiled. "Not wide, not bright, but real. Safe enough. If we build it ourselves." Bo stepped forward, crouching beside them. His hand brushed Willa's as he rested his palm on the sack between them. "You sure you want to keep it?" he asked. Willa didn't answer right away. She looked at Sadie, at the girl's torn coat and frost-bitten cheeks, at the weight she still carried in her eyes, far too old for 15. Then she nodded. "Not for me. For her. For every morning after this one." Bo nodded once, then sat beside them, the three of them close now, their shoulders almost touching. No words passed between them for a long while. Only breath. Only silence. But in that stillness, something shifted. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were something else. Something chosen. If this story stirred something in you, if you believe in second chances, quiet courage, and the kind of love forged through fire, don't ride off just yet. Like, share and subscribe to Whispers of the West for more tales where redemption runs deep and the silence speaks louder than words.